So in this video, we'll be showing you clips from 5 different videos from our pre-seen analysis pack. And the first clip is from the pre-seen analysis series. It's vital that you fully analyze your pre-seen, and this requires a detailed examination of the case study, ensuring that every section is fully understood. So our pre-seen analysis video provides a page-by-page analysis of every section of the pre-seen, and it ensures you don't miss anything important, and it helps you to build a comprehensive understanding of the material. And this is vital if you're going to gain high marks in the exam. So in this clip, we've taken a section from our pre-seen analysis video series.
Now, when people often get the pre-seen, they don't read this introduction. They skip right ahead to the risks or to the articles or to the financial statements. They do what an accountant might do, is look at the numbers. Look at the bigger tangible aspects. But just as the pre-seen is the context for the exam, the introduction is actually the context to the rest of the pre-seen. There's important information here that will guide us through the rest of the pre-seen. And there's going to be some key points that we can bring out from this particular introduction alone. So we'll start by looking at the first sentence. The first sentence clearly states that Rotomyne is a quoted company. It's a quoted organization, company that trades on the stock market, that mines lithium for sale to manufacturers who will then use the metal in the manufacture of various products, such as rechargeable batteries. So it's very important here that we identify exactly what it is we do. We mine lithium for sale to manufacturers. We are not a company that makes the batteries. So when we saw that image, the logo of the company where it had the picture of the batteries on, we are not actually a company that makes the batteries. And that's an important thing to get right, because if you start answering questions in the exam of we're selling batteries for cars, for Teslas and things like that, the marker will say they've not quite identified what exactly this company is and where it sits exactly within the supply chain. So we are a mining company that mines lithium. We don't make the batteries, we mine the metal that we sell to manufacturers. So I've just summarized there, just so we are aware. Now that sounds like a simple thing. It's very easy to understand that when you're just reading that sentence, but you'd be amazed at how many learners, when they actually get into writing their exam, they start making assumptions over what the organization does. Another point to raise from there is that manufacturers of batteries may be very large, powerful organizations. And also there's a lot of demand for lithium batteries. We know they're used in electric vehicles. We know they're used in mobile phones. All of these things are getting more and more popular, more and more in demand. Again, if you think of governments and the plans that they've got to try and eliminate internal combustion engines by deadlines. So the growth of EVs is only going to increase as well. But also, when you see that we're a company that mines, you should immediately be thinking, this is a very political industry. You can't just decide to go out and mine for something. You have to have permission to mine for something. You need to have the government on board with it. You need to do environmental studies. There's a huge environmental risk with mining, particularly if it leads to toxic waste getting put into drinking water, if it damages the ecosystem, if it kills wildlife, if it damages local communities, particularly in developing worlds. There's a lot of spotlights on organizations, mining companies, gold miners, diamond miners, etc., when they're mining in the developing world and the damage that they're doing to the local community. So ethics is going to be a big issue as well. Ethics is just naturally a huge issue in the CIMA Strategic Case Study exam. It's the most commonly examined topic. And the fact that we're a company that mines for minerals, potentially in the developing world, immediately should be sending ethical alarm bells off that ethics might be a major issue for this organization, for this exam, particularly, again, when we think about the environmental impact as well. But because the organization is listed, I've listed that as a strength. primarily because if you're a large organization with shareholders, you can increase your funding, you can gain extra funding from the market. There's at least a signal of security from a large quoted company. You don't think that a big quoted organization is going to collapse overnight in the same way that lots of small startups might collapse overnight. And there's a prestige there as well with dealing with that organization, whether you're an organization that is purchasing from the organization, whether you're a prospective miner or a prospective engineer, geologist, etc., that wants to work for the organization. So attracting the best talent for your organization is also helped there by being a quoted organization. And the next sentence is your role. So this is probably one of the most important sentences in this entire pre-scene, and you need to internalize this because this is going to set the scene for exactly how you were supposed to act when you're answering questions in the exam. It should also set the context for all answers that you give. So it says you are a senior manager in Rotomyne's finance function, reporting directly to the board, advising them on special projects and strategic matters. So there's a lot of important points here. You are not an operational level person. You are a senior manager. You are reporting to the board. Remember your role, remember your audience. This isn't like the operational case study. This isn't where you are regurgitating lots of theory and lots of operational technical knowledge. You're advising on strategic matters now. I don't want you to start when you see a question, it asks you about ethics or it asks you about the industry or anything from a very technical, theoretical perspective, start writing a huge list. So let's say investment appraisal. Oh, investment appraisal is where you analyze the value that you might generate from a project. There are many different types of this, such as net present value, such as internal rate of return. Let me talk about what each of these is and the strengths and weaknesses of them. Now, that's not what you're going to be tested on. That was already tested in your objective test exams and your lower level exams. Now you are advising on strategic matters. That may include your E3 and also potentially some of your E2s or project management, but just putting that in is not going to be sufficient either. You need to consider the risks on everything you suggest. You need to consider the funding and the practicalities of everything that you suggest. So you're bringing in your F3 risk management, you're bringing in your P3 risk management, you're bringing in your F3 financial management as well. And importantly, you need to recommend. Don't just answer questions with here's 1.4, here's 1.4, here's another 0.4, here's 3 points against. End of answer. You need to conclude and provide a recommendation. And you could go even further and just start mentioning, here's how we take this project forward. Because that's what a senior manager does. They take the project forward. And in the final part of this introduction, it tells us where our head office is located. It's located in a country called Poland. And that's a developed country with an active and well-regulated stock exchange. And of course, we are listed on that stock market. And when you see that, I think it's a developed country, usually there is a reasonable access to a talent pool, to education. So that's all important for making sure that we've got the right staff for our organization. But it does say that they own and operate lithium mines in 6 different countries. It doesn't tell us whether we actually have any mines in Poland at this point. It doesn't say where those countries are. But it does say that we compile our accounts in accordance with the International Financial Reporting Standards. And that's very advisable, particularly because, well, if we do operate in multiple countries, it's easier to compile our accounts to a set standard. But it does mean, given that we operate in many different countries, that we do need to be aware of the impact of exchange rates, the impact of foreign exchange, the impact of currency risk, those key risks that you'll remember from your syllabus, things like translation, transaction risk, etc. If we've got all our accounts in the P dollar, and the value of the P dollar plummets against a lot of the other currencies in countries that we're dealing with, that might make business very expensive for us. So currency risk and foreign exchange risk are definitely things that we need to keep an eye on. And that's particularly relevant given that we know that we are a lithium trader. We know that lithium is a commodity and is openly traded as a commodity as well. So the issues with futures and options and things like that can come into play as well. And just as another addition there with regards to strengths, as we are operating in multiple countries, we are somewhat diversified. I'm not saying we're a totally diversified organization in lots of different industries, but what it does mean is if something happens in one country and the mines are shut down, that we've still got 5 other countries that we have mines in. It's not like we are only mining in one particular country. So as you can see, just from looking at those 3 paragraphs, we've already started to draw out some important information. We've got some key strengths of the organization. We've already identified some key risks with regards to the size of our buyers and their buyer power, the political aspects of it, the impact on the environment, ethics, etc., currency risk, foreign exchange risk. And we can also draw out some key stakeholders already at this point. We know that we are a quoted company, so we know we're going to have shareholders. We know it's a very political industry, so the government is going to be an important stakeholder there, as are regulators for the industry, staff that work at our organization, our buyers, our suppliers within the supply chain, and also the local communities, making sure that we're not damaging local communities with our mining operations.
Next up, we've got a clip from our strategic analysis. It's extremely important that you have the ability to identify how the pre-seen relates to key models and theory, and the examiners will expect students to demonstrate a good understanding of the models and theories and make the appropriate links to the case study during the exam. It can be hard to fully analyze a company using models you've only recently learned and be confident that you've got it right. So our strategic analysis has done that hard work for you. So in this clip, we're going to take a look at our strategic analysis video.
So we'll begin by looking at the mission of the organization. Now, missions are very, very important. It's critical that Rotomyne has a mission, that it has some sort of common purpose. Now, this is not just for the board of directors. This is for everyone within the organization. This is for everyone that deals with Rotomyne, whether that's shareholders, whether that's suppliers, whether that's buyers. Everyone needs to know what Rotomyne is all about. And for you specifically, as a senior manager working in the finance function, someone who's going to be answering questions from the perspective of a senior manager working in the finance function, needs to be at the core, at the root of what you are suggesting. Because if you are suggesting things that go completely against what the organization is supposed to be about, what it values, what its overarching mission is, then you are not doing your role effectively. Because the whole point of the mission is supposed to be this set of guidance, of principles for anything that the organization does. And ideally, a good mission statement will tell you the purpose of the organization. Why does it exist? Who does it exist for? What does it hope to achieve in the long run? And you can imagine how important that is, because how are you supposed to make decisions for the future if you don't even know what we're trying to achieve? If you don't have a long-term ambition, a long-term goal, then strategies are just going to be based on what fits at the time you make the strategy, rather than looking to the future and thinking, right, our end goal was to get here. We can't just jump to there, but we can put in perhaps an annual strategy this year that is going to take us a step closer to that goal. So if we think about what Rotomyne's mission is from the pre-seen, their mission is to power consumers' lives in a world that is clean, healthy, and sustainable. So we can start to read from some of those key points why the organization exists. It exists to provide power for consumers' lives, so power for electric vehicles, power for phones, power for whatever it may be. But it also exists to provide a world that is clean, healthy, and sustainable. So what I meant earlier when I said about how that when you're answering questions from the perspective of a senior manager working in the finance function, that you need to be thinking about that mission. If you're about to suggest something which is going to have a very negative impact on the environment, is that something that the organization should be promoting, should be doing, given that their mission is to provide a clean, healthy, and sustainable world? Because something that is bad for the environment is not doing that. So when you are making decisions for this company, when you are suggesting these, you are making recommendations for the future of the organization, you need to keep in mind that anything you suggest to be suitable for this organization, given its mission, needs to be clean, healthy, and sustainable. But what about the strategy of the organization? That's how it's going to be competing. The range of businesses it is operating within. Now, we know that we operate in the lithium mining industry. That's how we are competing. We are producing the best, highest quality lithium that we can, or extracting the best, highest quality lithium that we can. But on top of that, it needs to be done in a way that ties with our values. And that's the next part of this section, is what does the organization stand for? Does it stand for quality? Does it stand for value for money, innovation? And if we look at the pre-seen, what we can see is that we as an organization, as Rotomyne, we act ethically, we act honestly, with integrity, we act in a sustainable manner to ensure we are providing a safe working environment, and that we are constantly innovating to be responsive to customer needs. So again, these are what we value as an organization, being responsive to the needs of a customer. If one of our major buyers, and we know that we have a huge buyer that's 22% of our revenue, electric vehicle producer, if they require us to provide the lithium in a different way, to a different level of quality, or to be stored and transported in a different way, or to a different location, we need to be responsive to that need, because that's what we value as an organization. We also need to be innovative. There was a lot of talk in the pre-seen about this idea of direct lithium extraction, and how this was very much in its infancy, but it was a far better way of extracting lithium that used less water, that was less harmful to the environment. So as an innovative organization, we need to be trying to invest, trying to make that more commercially viable, so that the actual act of lithium extraction can be more sustainable. There are also plenty of other alternatives as well. One thing that did come out in the pre-seen was this idea of sodium-ion batteries, and how they were far more efficient, that sodium was far more abundant, and it was therefore much better for the environment. Now, the downside, of course, to them is that they are far larger, but there are plenty of times where a very small lithium battery is not needed, such as to store energy at a solar plant, to store energy at a wind farm, for example. Those were examples that were actually given to us in the pre-seen in those articles. And then the final part of when we're looking at what the organization is about is the policies. What kinds of policies do we have in place to ensure that people act according to our values, strategy, and purpose? So there's nothing in the pre-seen about that, but it's something that we should have in place. A lot of organizations have these ideas, these credos, these mantras about what the organization is about, and perhaps we need to have one that is installing that purpose, strategy, and values upon the rest of the organization, so that all staff act according to it. Because it's no good just having the senior managers, the board, etc., that are living those strategies, living those mission, the vision, the values, etc., and they perhaps only go through it once a year at some big company meeting. It needs to be something that everyone, at every level of the organization, from the people working in the finance department, the marketing department, the mining part of the business, the processing part of the business, all of them need to be living and breathing that mission, vision, and values and making decisions, because it's only by everyone working towards that common purpose is that common purpose ever going to be achieved. It's an easy example, but think of a centipede. A centipede has 100 legs, but all 100 legs need to be walking in one direction for the centipede to move. If every single leg of that centipede was trying to move in a different direction, the centipede would not get anywhere. So that's why this idea of a mission is so important. It's not just a tick box exercise or something flashy to have on your website. It's something that needs to be installed throughout the organization.
We're casting the net a little bit wider now with a look at the wider industry in which the Pre-seen company operates with our industry analysis video. It is critical to demonstrate to the examiner that you have fully understood the Pre-seen industry as a key element to gaining extra high marks in your case study exam. Researching the industry can be a laborious process, especially when you're not sure which information is useful and which isn't. And our team has spent hours doing this research for you, finding the information that will help you to achieve a wider perspective of the industry and build a deeper knowledge in preparation for your exam. So in this next clip, we'll be taking a look at our industry analysis video.
Given the prevalence of lithium in the modern world, it is only natural that we think of mobile phones and battery packs with their rechargeable lithium batteries, or perhaps electric cars such as Tesla, the global power of which has afforded Elon Musk the ability to spend billions of dollars on a social media platform. But it's been around a lot longer than that, if perhaps only in a slightly smaller and less significant way. Whilst today, lithium is often termed white gold due to the value it retains as a strategic resource, which is all related to electrochemical potential and in particular lithium's ability to undergo reversible reactions. So if we're going to put this into slightly more layman's terms, we're thinking about in a rechargeable battery, the lithium ions are able to move backwards and forwards between a positive section of the battery and a negative section of the battery when charged. And this is why it has become so essential in these rechargeable batteries as we're speaking about, particularly for Elon Musk's Tesla vehicles and our mobile phones. But beyond this, it has had much more simple and humble origins based in the 19th century, as it was originally used for slightly more niche applications like glass production, industrial lubricant, and pharmaceuticals. Now back then, as you would expect, lithium mining was a much smaller scale industry as these uses are much more niche. But as we moved into the 20th century, in particular the late 20th century, which saw the invention and mass production of our lovely lithium batteries, demand for compact and efficient power sources in electronics skyrocketed, and lithium became essential, sporting a boom in the lithium mining industry. And when demand overtakes supply, what happens in an industry? Well, you might expect a technological revolution. Development in the manufacturing processes and material used in this process in order to both improve the performance of products, so the batteries we're speaking of, but also reduced cost by making the processes of extraction and processing more efficient, which all stems from our wonderful research and development, the development of science, and our fourth industrial revolution. And since lithium has been placed It has been placed at the heart of our daily lives. I'm sat here right now and my laptop is using a lithium battery. I've got my phone very naughtily next to me while I'm recording, and even this microphone in front of me, which is not directly running on a rechargeable battery, but in the process of its creation, throughout its inception in someone's mind, its creation on a laptop of some kind, the transfer of this file onto an industrial computer linked to a production machine, there would have been lithium involved somewhere along the way. So fast forward to our modern day. There are lots of concerns surrounding lithium, as well as all this positive economic and social growth. In the late 20th century, there were improvements made to counteract overheating and leakage within lithium batteries, which has helped to assuage some of the issues such as fires on planes or in your home caused by overheating batteries. But there are bigger and broader problems associated with the lithium mining industry, and we'll come to these a little bit later in the video. But for now, I want you to start to consider the ramifications of environmental concerns that are associated with mining potentially harmful chemicals, compounds. And as a result, we are going to have a look at some of the regulations that governments are tightening in order not just to make it harder for mining operations to be approved without comprehensive environmental plans, but also to make sure that when they are approved, that there is sustainable practices in place in order for their impact to be minimalized on the environment. Now, this next point is something we're going to be returning to quite a lot throughout this presentation, and that is the lithium industry is going to be constantly evolving. We have not yet seen the final phase, the final form of what these mining companies look like, and this is best evidenced by a new environmentally friendly method called direct lithium extraction. As the global demand for lithium hit 500,000 tons in 2021 and is expected to reach 4 million tons in 2023, remember these statistics as they're going to be useful in your exam, the future of lithium mining may look promising, but as we will see, it's going to involve balancing the skyrocketing demand which caused all these revolutions and this advancement in the first place, with the environmental and social challenges that come along with such a profitable but damaging industry.
The next clip is taken from one of our most popular videos, the Top 10 Issues. The Top 10 Issues video identifies the 10 most likely issues to appear in the exam based on our expertise and experience in this area. And our expert gives guidance on how to deal with the issues in your answers, provides advice on which models to use, and key points that you should raise. Based on our experience of analysing CIMA case studies for over 10 years, our predictions have been extremely accurate in previous exams, with around 70 to 80% of topics in the real exams being covered in our top 10 lists. So take a look now at this clip from our top 10 issues video.
So that's an overview of what to do with this information and where this information has come from. Let's start now with the 10 most likely unseen issues, with number 10 being the first, and that being funding. Funding and financial aspects. Now, the reason why this is one of the top 10 issues is because it's a huge key key F3 topic. So your different types of funding, such as equity funding through the stock market, debt funding through raising loans, etc., the cost of capital and how that impacts your projects and so on. And the reason why this has come up as a likely issue is because it's constantly examined. it's always used as part of other questions. So anything that's to do with perhaps installing a new IT system, anything that's to do with investing in a new project, anything that's to do with expanding into a new location, offering a new service, all of these things have a cost attached to them. So you need to consider the cost, particularly given that the role that you've been given for this from CIMA's SCS guide includes identifying where funding is going to be raised. If you start saying we should go into this field, we should go into that field, we should invest here, invest there, but you never talk about where the money is going to come from, that is not showing and demonstrating decent business acumen. So it's a very, very examined add-on issue that needs to be included in pretty much everything that you talk about. Anything that involves money, involves funding, any question that you have to raise funding, you have to show where funding is going to come from, you make sure you talk about funding. And there's going to be a lot, because there is going to be a need for money to support large investment projects, and there were lots and lots of investment projects mentioned or inferred from this pre-seen. The different alternatives to lithium batteries, the new sites, the new partnerships with academic institutions, for example, all of these require cash, which will be needed to support those investments. And so, as I mentioned, it's likely to be an add-on to an investment issue, but it may also be for a large project, acquiring or merging, investing in a new project, perhaps sodium-ion batteries, lithium-sulfur batteries, etc., or general organic growth, trying to expand our existing operations. Could also be for short-term working capital. We have very high trade payables, and we actually have quite low quick and current ratios, and of course we've got lots of people that will need their salaries paid and so on. So it could be that we need to take on additional short-term loans to pay for our working capital, particularly if the lithium prices are fluctuating or the supply is fluctuating and we haven't got a steady stream of revenue. So some key points based on that would be the amount of money that we do have in the bank. It was 857 million Poland dollars. Sounds like a lot, but a lot will be needed for working capital, for salaries, for day-to-day expenses. Remember, our trade payables are already very, very high. We owe 1.7 billion. So we couldn't pay off those trade payables, for example, with the cash that we have. So to just say, oh, we've got 857 million in the bank, let's spend 857 million on projects, that's not going to work, particularly when negative cash flows must be planned for. Cash flow budgeting, very, very important. We have very low quick and current ratios here. Particularly when we remove the inventories, and the inventories we can't always rely on being able to sell, particularly if there is a surplus of lithium in the market and the price is very low, etc. We actually can't pay off our current liabilities with our current assets. Also, our debt funding is currently very high as well. 103.86% or 50.95%, depending whether you use the long-term debt over equity or the long-term debt over long-term debt plus equity method. No right or wrong answer there, as long as you state which one you are using and you always use the same one. You're not comparing different companies, different years, using different methods. So that high level of debt, particularly when compared to Liftig, which had much lower levels of debt. So the fact that they have lower levels of debt suggests that it's not just a common thing in the industry, that all companies in this industry have that level of debt. Means that it may make it harder to take on additional debt funding, but we do have a lot of tangible assets that could be potentially used as security to raise debt against. And relevant theories here could be to talk about where your lenders, where your equity providers, your major shareholders of banks, etc. would sit. Usually they're very powerful, but sometimes not particularly interested in what's going on. A bank isn't going to be checking in with us on a day-to-day basis as long as we are paying off our finance costs and so on. You've also got the differences between debt funding and equity funding. Debt can be very quick, and it can be very cheap to raise additional debt funding. It's a much lower cost a form of funding than equity, whereas equity you'd usually only raise huge amounts of, you'd only use equity to raise huge amounts of capital through issuing new shares, rights issues, those sorts of things, and it's a very expensive way of raising debt. On the other hand, you don't technically ever need to pay dividends. certain shareholders may not like it, but it's not actually a legal requirement. Whereas, of course, interest payments for loans that you've taken out from lenders, from banks, is. So you've got some different advantages and disadvantages there. So that's our first major likely issue. The second one, issue number 9, is acquisitions. And again, acquisitions is very commonly examined topic. It's also very, very easy to write a question about this. It's probably one of the best topics to cover most or a significant part of the CIMA syllabus in a way that is also logical and a way that reflects a real world type scenario, because it covers risks. It covers due diligence, it covers funding, it covers valuation methods, it covers strategy, it covers change management, it covers loads of different parts of the CIMA syllabus. And again, it links with funding because we'd have to raise funds for an acquisition, but it's also a basis of choice because of the way in which the industry perhaps has grown. It grows through the acquisition of smaller companies and merging of companies. We know that both Liftig and Rotomyne had a lot of goodwill on their balance sheets, which suggests that they have acquired in the past, which makes it easier to acquire in the future. And also because of the difficulty in finding a competitive advantage. There's 4 big lithium mining companies that account for over 50% of the lithium. And because lithium is a commodity, it's very difficult to say why your lithium is just so much better than a competitor's lithium. So a good way to gain more advantage is to control more of the market, and therefore acquisitions and mergers might lead into that. So it could be that we are talking about an acquisition because of the need for growth, the need for working with another company, purchasing another company to develop new processes. Perhaps there's a smaller company that's really locked down sodium-ion batteries or has locked down the direct lithium extraction. It could also be about being acquired. Maybe Liftig is going to try and acquire us. Sometimes there could even be benefits to being acquired. But other things that we need to discuss or potentially around this would be assuming that maybe an acquisition had already been agreed before it comes to us, is we'd need to talk about the problems with integration, problems with the cultural changes, the problems with the merging of certain head office functions, but also the need for it because of how important it is to grow. Perhaps it's important to diversify our service offerings. We know we're very, very dependent on lithium, and we're then at the wheels of the lithium commodity market and the demand for lithium, etc. So some key points to bring could be the benefits of it, the different types of acquisitions as well, whether it's we're acquiring another company that's doing what we're doing, whether we're acquiring through vertical integration, so one of our suppliers, one of our buyers, or a completely different acquisition altogether to completely diversify us into an entirely different industry. And to also talk about how it's an opportunity for the company, but make sure you talk about business valuations. How do we actually go about valuating organizations that we're purchasing appropriately? How it's one of the key methods for growth, particularly if you want to make quick progress in a new area. But of course, do remember to mention the risks involved, as that's another key part of your role. So some key theories here could be the problems of acquisitions, the problems of integrating, ensuring you've got effective change management systems in place, making sure that you've done your effective due diligence, what's covered in there, such as legal checks and financial checks, all those sorts of things, because you don't want to purchase a company and then find out a month later that there's some huge multi-billion-dollar lawsuit facing that company that's now all of your responsibility. But of course, the advantages of that is that you can quickly gain new share. It's very quick. You gain that knowledge as well. If you purchase a company as a going concern, you purchase it with all the staff that are there. And also the types of valuations, earnings-based, dividend-based, asset-based, all those different methods you need to run through to choose a more appropriate one. If it's a public company, of course, it's usually quite simple. It's just the number of shares in issue by the share price. But if it's a private company, you have to look at the different methods. Assets, usually a good starting point, but it's generally not one that is the final price, because of course the asset-based valuation is just a case of the value of the assets in the organization. Well, that's not what makes a business valuable. A business is not just worth the value of the equipment that they have and the building that they have. There's all sorts of other things, intangibles, that make up the value of a company.
Our final clip is from our mini mock debrief video. We produce a range of mock exams for each sitting, and alongside each of those mocks is a video debrief. And in these debrief videos, our experienced tutor analyzes every question and takes you through a step-by-step guide on the best way to approach them. And by watching debrief videos, you'll learn to understand how to pick out all of the key information in the task and the requirements. You'll use that information to build an effective plan. Many students fail due to poor answer planning. And then that will help you to formulate an excellent answer. So in our sample video, tutor will take you through question 1 of the mini mock.
So we'll start with task 1, as that is the logical place to start. And we can see that we have got 30 minutes to create our answer to this particular question. Now, of course, in the real exam, you will have 60 minutes, but here we just have the 30, and therefore we only have half the marks as well. So what we'd be looking for here is around about 17 marks worth of content. And that will be split between the specific subtasks. Now, generally in the real exam, you'll have 2 to 3 subtasks. Often it takes the form of 2 questions have 2, 1 question has 3. And these are important. It's important that you cover all the subtasks. It's also very important that you do, because this is how CIMA ensures that the core activities are completed, because each subtask will be linked to a certain core activity. But you must make sure to keep aware of the percentages. The percentages are a recommendation of how much time you should spend on each subtask. And what we can read into that is, yes, the amount of time, but also the amount of marks that are available. So if this is a 17-mark question and we are being recommended to spend 60% of our time on subtask A and 40% on subtask B, that means we roughly need to produce 10 marks worth of content for subtask A and 7 marks for subtask B. And it's also very advisory to make sure that you keep an eye on those timings as well, and that when you get to the point where you should perhaps be moving on, that you do so. So for example, in this particular question, it's 30 minutes. So what we'll do is we'll deduct 25% for our planning, because planning is very, very important. And that then leaves us with 22.5 minutes. So that means we can spend 13 to 14 minutes on subtask A and the remaining time on subtask B. And when you have spent 14 minutes on subtask A, you need to consider moving on, because nothing will cost you more marks than not getting on to answer the second subtask. Because remember, there are only 10 marks of content for subtask A. It doesn't matter if you write an absolute brilliant answer. It doesn't matter if you write an answer with 30, 40 amazing points that should be worth 30, 40 marks. There's only 10 marks available. So once you've written 10 marks worth of content, it's actually redundant to write any more. It's far better to move on to subtask B. But that's just a bit of an exam tip rather than anything specific to this particular question. But when you do get your question, it will often be in this form as an email or a memo or something along those lines. I would always advise going directly to the requirement lines. And the reason for this is because it then lets you know what you are looking for. It's not to say that you'll know how to answer the question, you don't need to read the rest of it, but you will know what you are looking for when it comes to looking through the rest of the content. So for example, this one, subtask A, an evaluation of the viability of this proposed project for Rotomyne on the assumption that we use our usual cost of capital. Now, of course, we can't answer that immediately because we don't even know what project they're talking about. The same for subtask B, where it says, recommend a way to move forward with this project, including your justifications and your key strategic actions. Well, we don't know what we're actually talking about at this point. But what it does do for us is it tells us that there's a proposed project, And our role is to conduct an evaluation of this project and the viability of it. So when we're going through the rest of the content, we now need to look, we can look out for, is this going to help me answer that question? And this is different from a very linear approach where you start looking at it line by line and you start thinking, well, this could mean this could mean that. That's pointless. You're not just analysing and speculating on what the question might be. Skip ahead to the question requirement line, find out what you actually need to do, and then when you know what you need to do, you can look through the rest of the content, the rest of the unseen, the rest of the reference material, etc., with a clear focus of what information you need to answer the question. So as we can see, it's asking us for an evaluation of the viability of this proposed project. Now, the classic model to use in this instance is the suitability, acceptability, feasibility model, because that ultimately assesses the viability. If it's suitable, if it's acceptable, if it's feasible, it's a viable project. If it's not suitable, it's not feasible, it's not acceptable, or any kind of combination of those, then perhaps it isn't as viable. And the good thing about the suitability, acceptability, feasibility model is it also provides us with a lot of jumping off points. The natural things that fall under mission, the suitability, such as mission and values, acceptable to your different stakeholders, your shareholders, employees, communities. The feasibility, do we have the resources and the manpower? Do we have the knowledge? Do we have the costs? Do we have the money available to pay for the costs, etc.? So all of a sudden we're already looking at all of this information, and this can help us to write a really good answer. So now that we know what we are looking for, let's take a look back through the rest of the unseen. So the board has identified a potential acquisition opportunity in NA charge. Now, acquisitions, we know from the pre-seen, we know that there's a lot of goodwill at the company, which suggests that acquisitions perhaps have happened in the past, and therefore when it comes to thinking about feasibility and the difficulties of acquisitions, we have some experience doing it. So we can add that into our answer. That's another thing to raise already. And NA Charge is an innovative sodium mining and battery producer. So when you're thinking of the resources, thinking of the knowledge, well, we're a lithium miner. We don't produce batteries, so we wouldn't have the knowledge of battery production, but we do have some knowledge in the mining process. Now, sodium mining is going to be different than lithium mining, but we have many, many years, decades of experience of being a mining organization. So we do have some knowledge and transferable skills there. It also says that the organization shares many of Rotomyne's values. So when we're thinking again back to our suitability, acceptability, feasibility, when we're thinking about the suitability of this acquisition, if it's a company that shares the values of us, then that's going to ease the integration. It's also going to likely affect the way in which that organization operates. Are they going to operate in a way that is innovative, which is one of our values? Are they going to operate in a way where they're responsive to stakeholder needs, which again is specifically one of our values? And if you do have that congruency of values, that's quite beneficial because it then makes it easier to integrate. If you have a company that is a very ethical company but purchases a company that isn't ethical and all they think about is making quick money, then sometimes that becomes a culturally difficult organization to integrate into yours. And of course, ultimately, integrating is what is going to make this acquisition efficient, is what going to create that synergy. And this is also in response to a report created by the Industry Insight Unit. Please see the attached extract, along with a forecast cost of the project. So we know we have information on the cost, and we also have information about a news article profiling NA charge. And these are what they call the reference material. And the reference material is given to you by CIMA, and there'll be reference material for every single question. And it's very, very important that you do not ignore this information. They've given it to you for a reason. They expect you to reference it, to use it in your answer. So please don't ignore it. That's another exam tip for you. But what we can see is that we've already started to build our skeleton structure for our answer there. And we're already bringing in parts of the pre-seen. We've already mentioned about the values of the company, parts of the unseen, such as the company and a charge and information about them. Now let's go and look at our reference material. And remember, we need to add this to our answer. We need to add information from it. And it's talking about the demand for sodium-ion batteries and how it's rising as organizations seek alternatives to traditional lithium-ion technology. And you may remember there was actually an article about this in the pre-seen, that sodium-ion is perhaps not commercially viable at the moment, but there is a lot of investment in sodium-ion batteries. Main reason for that is because it's such an abundant resource. So you don't have the problems that you have with lithium. Lithium is very scarce and it is very disruptive to mine for, whereas sodium is much more abundant. So from an environmental perspective, from a long-term sustainability perspective, it's perhaps a better option, it's more attractive, and it's cheaper to mine for as well. So that makes it less susceptible to price volatilities and supply chain issues, which we know, again from the pre-seen, affect lithium. If there is a shortage of lithium, the price skyrockets. If there's a surplus of lithium in the market, the price falls. And if you are not monitoring your supply chain effectively, you might be left with a huge amount of lithium at a time when there is a surplus, meaning that you either can't sell it or you have to sell it for a really cheap price, and that actually affects your profitability. Now we know that they're not as useful, sodium-ion batteries, because they are larger, so they aren't useful for things like electric vehicles and mobile phones. But they can be used as a very effective way to store large amounts of energy where size is not a problem. So the article in the pre-seen specifically spoke about solar farms and wind farms. So we know from this insight unit, we know from the pre-seen that there is going to be a lot of demand for these batteries. So that's the first thing that we need to be aware of, that there's going to be a demand for it. There's no point in entering a market or acquiring an organization that's already in the market if you're actually worried about whether there's even going to be demand in the future. But it then goes on to say that despite this growing interest, there are limited options available, and few companies have committed to developing this technology at scale. And we know that that's because at the moment it's not commercially viable. It's more expensive to produce, more expensive to conduct the research than the actual output is. And that may sound like a reason to not get into the market. And I perfectly understand that as a reason. But we need to think longer term about the future. There's a real risk that if we wait until the technology has caught up and everyone can produce sodium-ion batteries effectively, there's a real risk that we will lose out because the market will then eventually become more saturated again. There's a real value to being the first to the market, the first to do this correctly. So that's something that we do need to be aware of when we're thinking about our organization. We're thinking about the sustainability of our company. We know our profit decreased in the last year, our revenue decreased in the last year. We know we have no suitable mines to expand our lithium production at the moment. This could be a real option, particularly if we can be the first ones to make efficient and scalable batteries and efficient and scalable sodium mining sites. But there have been specialized startups and research institutions actively pursuing these developments, despite the fact that larger battery manufacturers and industry leaders such as Rotomyne have been slow to adopt this technology. There's a key bit of information here in the next paragraph that says that the government in Poland, so that's of course the country that we're based, recognizes this potential and is offering funding incentives. This often takes the form of tax breaks, aimed at promoting the development of greener and more resilient energy storage technologies. However, the lack of major players investing in sodium-ion has slowed the pace of adoption, leaving a gap in the availability of commercial-scale sodium-ion options. And the Insight is then recommended that we either partner with or acquire an appropriate organization that is already specializing in this area, one of these more specialized startups. So a few things to read into this is that there is demand for sodium ion, that there is an opportunity here to be the first major player to the market, and that there are government incentives to entering this market, all of which we can bring through into our answers. All of these improve the suitability, they improve the feasibility. And also, when we think of our acceptability, we know that sodium ion has a need. There are buyers that will need it. If it makes money, our shareholders are going to be happy. It's not going to have a direct impact on our existing employees, so they're probably going to be happy. And also from a community perspective, it's much better for the environment. So it's much better for the general communities. It's much better for the general public as well. So from an acceptable point of view, it scores highly as well. And then we have the analysis, the financial analysis here. We can see that in the first few years, it's going to cost 80 million Poland dollars a year. Now, that may sound like a very affordable amount, given that we have 857 million in the bank. But remember that we've got 1.7 billion in trade payables. Remember that we've got falling margins. Remember that we've got working capital requirements. We've got a working capital cycle, which is not particularly synced up. It was a very negative working capital cycle. So working capital requirements need to be factored in here. That money is not just there to be spent, there to be invested. A lot of it will be needed. And we may need to find a way of raising additional funds, but that might in turn also be very difficult because of our very high gearing and our relatively low interest cover and our very low quick and current ratio. But despite that, it is going to generate a reasonable return. We've got a net present value of 78 million Poland dollars here. So that's certainly going to add value to our organization above and beyond the return required by shareholders. And this is also just the start. This is just the initial acquisition of the organization. There may be plenty of further opportunities presented in the future as a result of this acquisition. So there might be plenty of new projects that are going to generate even further returns and add further value to the company in the future. And the final piece of reference material is to do with the organization itself. You can see that they are a relatively new company, only a few years old, but they are based in Poland, in the capital city. And relatively small organization. The employees that might be most affected would be these 84 head office staff working in central functions, which of course might be, there might be a, when there's a merge for the HR, the IT, the finance departments, there may be some potential redundancies, but the engineers specifically working in battery production, etc., they're not going to be affected by it, as are existing lithium miners, because they are not going to be affected as well. This isn't going to affect their roles, particularly as they'd like to be based in different locations. A couple of key values there about trust, about sustainability. These are things that do link with the values of Rotomyne as well. So again, it is a company that's in a similar but different area, but they share a lot of similar values. They're working ultimately on the same sorts of operations. It's just different. It's sodium mining rather than lithium mining, and also with the battery production. But that in turn may also offer future options for us as well. Maybe if we become experts at battery production, we can produce our own lithium batteries. We can then take more control of the supply chain that mitigates that supply chain risk that we already know exists. So we've got quite a lot to be getting on with return in terms of writing our answer. Just going to return to the part B, just to go through the second part. So moving forward with this project, are we going to make a recommendation or not? How we justify it, and how we create our actions and our strategic actions. Now these are really, really useful for you in this exam, because action points are a great way to earn a lot of marks quite easily and effectively, because they can be quite generic while seeming and appearing to be very, very high level, to be very specific, very senior. So it's things like appointing a project leader and setting up a project team and getting the board approval and sourcing the funding and setting milestones for the project and then reviewing the project when it's complete to see what lessons we can take forward. So a lot to bring in there as well. So with that in mind, let's now jump over to our second presentation where we're going to start putting our plan together. And so you can see we've got our task 1, task 2 and task 3, and this is where we're going to build our plans. Now, of course, we haven't looked at task 2 and 3 yet, so we'll just look at task 1 for the moment. And we've got our part A, which was worth 60%, and our part B that was worth 40%. So as you can probably guess from what we went through in the analysis, we're going to use the suitability, we're going to use the acceptability and the feasibility model here. And some key suitability factors here is that we do have some knowledge in this industry already, but it is still high risk as we're not involved in sodium mining, we're not involved in battery production. The customers may be different, the market is different, the product is different. So it's a high risk strategy. But it does diversify our revenue stream, which is going to be beneficial for us, particularly given the demands facing the lithium market at the moment with our margins decreasing, etc. With regards to acceptability, as I mentioned, the shareholders, the employees, the clients, unlikely to be massively affected by it and therefore more likely to find it acceptable. One thing I would say though is that whilst it did have a positive net present value, it was done using our existing cost of capital. And there is an argument to say that that is not a fair estimate because it is a high risk project. It is something new that we've not done before. A higher percentage should be used to factor in that risk. And with regards to feasibility, on paper we can afford it, but we do need to consider the working capital needs both of the acquisition and of the Rotomyne business. But the fact that it is a going concern that's going to be generating its own cash flow from the start as well helps with that feasibility. The fact that the knowledge that we'll need would hopefully be retained within an organization, and that therefore that reduces again some of that risk. And again, with the resourcing, the right knowledge, the right information, the right staff, a lot of that hopefully will be achieved if we can retain the existing staff and retain the company as a going concern. So turn all of those into a paragraph and link it to the case and link it to the answer, even if you have to be really on the nose and say, and this is why it's a viable project for Rotomyne, etc. That will earn you a really good answer. And for the recommendation, we perhaps say that yes, we should go ahead with it, but we need to make sure that we review the cost of capital and that it's still a viable project, even with a higher risk factor incorporated into it. We can justify it, but the long-term benefit, long-term sustainability of the organization being an appropriate time to enter with those subsidies and the government incentives, the fact that we will have the knowledge, we will have the ability, we know that there's going to be demand for this in the future. And we might take it forward by calculating that new cost of capital using betas of other organizations public organizations in this area, get up the board approval and then set up the project team, review those milestones and maybe conduct a post-completion audit once complete as well to see what lessons we can learn going forward or even what lessons we can apply to the rest of the business. And that would be a very, very strong answer for task 1 that would earn us the marks we need to pass.
So there we have it, 5 key videos to get you started with your exam preparation. I hope you found them useful, but the reality is that this is just the starting point and you'll need to do a lot more preparation over the next few weeks to improve your chances of passing this tricky exam. And to that end, we have a number of options available. The video clips you've just seen are taken from our course content. And our courses are designed to help you ultimately pass the exam. We want to minimize your study time. And of course, we want to ensure that you're getting your value for your money. So if you want more of what you saw today, you want to check out our full pre-seen analysis pack. And that basically includes the full videos from which those clips were taken, from the pre-seen analysis videos through to the top 10 analysis, the strategic analysis, industry analysis, and in addition to that, we've also got 30 pre-seen questions that are designed to help you consolidate your knowledge and understanding of the pre-seen company. Pre-seen analysis is a crucial first step, but passing the exam requires developing your exam technique and lots of practice. So the best all-round comprehensive solution is the Astranti Premium course. On that, in addition to everything you get in the pre-seen analysis pack, you'll also get 5 mock exams. And those mock exams are written according to the pre-seen company. They're not generic and they don't have generic solutions. They're applied to the pre-seen and they're based on the top 10 issues. So you'll get questions in the mock exam that they'll have a good chance of coming up in the real exam. In addition to those mock exams, you can get mock marking and feedback. And this is where you'll submit a mock exam to your dedicated marker and they will mark that and give you a fully annotated script with feedback and annotations. And they also provide a 9-page document with feedback that you can apply in your next mock. In addition to that, we've got our exam technique video series. Exam technique is really important in this exam. And so our exam technique video series has 13 chapter study texts and accompanying videos taking you through every aspect of exam technique, right from understanding the exam through to interpreting the requirements, answer planning, writing technique, and time management. Really valuable course that will help you a lot developing those soft skills that you need to do well in this exam. Alongside that, we have 3 live masterclasses that run throughout the course, from the first one that's looking at the pre-seen through to later ones that look more at exam technique and theory revision to help you get ready. Included in the premium, you get access to tutor and mentor support, and you'll be able to access our discussion hub where you can post your questions and talk with other students and tutors about any questions and queries you may have. And our premium course comes with our double pass guarantee, and that's exclusive to premium course students. It's a double guarantee because if you take this course and you don't pass the exam, we'll give it you again for free with no extra charge. And you also have a 14-day money-back guarantee. So if after 14 days on the course you're not happy, you can get a refund, no questions asked. So whatever your situation, we believe we have the solution for you at Astranti, and you can find out more at astranti.com/CIMA. Thanks for watching.